When I began this script, the gentleman it's about was still alive, but while writing it, he stopped being alive. So forgive this monologue for taking a slightly depressing turn about halfway through, but I just hope it helps someone if you miss a human who is gone. When I was 17, about 300 years ago, P2P clients were all the rage, like LimeWire and BearShare, etc., and I accidentally downloaded this song by a band called Silver Jews. And I listened to it, and I thought, what the hell is this? They can't even play their instruments. And a few days later, it came up again randomly on Media Player or whatever, and another few days, and another listen, and then something hit me, and I fell in love with their stuff. It happened immediately. I listened to everything they'd ever done, ever, and just completely fell into their music. And it was the lyrics that really got me. Stuff like, you've got Tennessee tendencies and chemical dependencies, you make the same old jokes and malapropes on cue. And I thought, I will never, as long as I live, write as well as that. Ever. The lead singer was called David Berman. He sang about Nashville a lot. I didn't know anything about Nashville, and I don't really go nuts for country music. But if he liked it, then I liked it too, and I built up this teenage image of Nashville, of poets smoking quietly to themselves in bars and having long thinks about reality. I read all of David Berman's poetry, I listened to his interviews, even saw his band once in England, and it was one of the best days of my life. I continued being obsessed with David Berman for about the next decade, and dreamt of going to Nashville, where my hero sang about and seemed to find his peace there. And finally, I was an adult, and because I was an adult, it occurred to me I could just go to Nashville if I wanted, so I went to Nashville. After spending a day flying from Eastern Europe through Chicago, finally we were on approach for Nashville Airport. The flight attendant asked me if I wanted a drink, so I said whiskey. She said normal measure or Tennessee measure. I was too embarrassed to ask what the hell a Tennessee measure was, but I had a drinker's intuition and took a gamble and said Tennessee measure please, which did indeed pay off because she returned with what I can only describe as a bucket of whiskey. I remembered being 17, over a decade gone by since, and hearing a line from one of David Berman's songs that over a decade later had led me to this place. I'm drunk on a couch in Nashville, in a duplex near the reservoir, and every single thought is like a punch in the face. I'm like a rabbit freezing on a star. I had and have no idea what that meant, but damn, it sounded good. I'd arranged to meet a friend from the UK there, and him and I wandered around Nashville for a few days, and it was a nice city. The people were kind to us, and the food was great, and we found a bar where the staff had been instructed to insult the customers mercilessly, and we thought that was just swell. We listened to people in checkered shirts singing songs about blues and heartbreak, and were very, very impressed. But you know, it's the strangest thing, because behind the music and the food and the witty bar staff, it was just a city. There was no magic element, no temple to this guy I'd turned into a god. We were having a lovely time, but this was just a place. Walking down the more popular streets, I thought, I bet David Berman walked on that very same bit of pavement recently. Or, I bet that's where David Berman bought some beer once. And I thought about reaching out to him, or trying. I thought about doing that a lot for over 10 years, but what the hell would I even say? Hey, you don't know me, but I know you. Kind of. Not really, but kind of. And your music almost single-handedly defined the last decade and a half of my life. You want to get a cup of tea or something? No, it sounded stupid. I flew back home and thought about the trip lots. I was glad we'd gone, but I hadn't found whatever it was I'd been after. David Berman had obviously found something there through years of living in it, but maybe it was something that couldn't be communicated. And fine. Then, about 4 months ago, I was having a bit of a thoughtful moment in an Airbnb in Trondheim, Norway, and decided to listen to some more of David Berman's new album, Purple Mountains, which is the shit, by the way. And while listening, I scrolled through the YouTube comments and noticed these mentions of RIP and assumed it must be a meme. But it wasn't a meme. David Berman took his own life on August 7th of this year. The details aren't entirely clear, but the interviews he gave beforehand strongly indicated he was not a terribly happy human, nor had he been for a long time previously. The strange thing is, that was his strength, to me anyway. He got down sadness and loneliness and feeling like a freak better than I've ever heard it done before, and I think those of us who loved his music, who loved him, really felt stronger and less alone because he did it so well. I sure did anyway. And reading the outpourings of love for him recently, now that he's gone, endless comment threads saying more or less exactly what I've just said above, loving him for the same reasons as I did and do, you can imagine how surprised I was when I found this line of his from an interview a while ago. I'm not convinced I have fans, he said. In my whole life, I've had maybe 10 people who told me how much my music means to them. And I just thought, are you serious? I don't think he was saying that for attention. I don't think he was lying. And that is fucking tragic, because just I alone loved him more than any other artist living or dead, and thousands of other people I know for certain felt the same way about him. All over the world, there was a community of people who had never met him, who had never even reached out, but had been enormously helped by this man, and he seemed to have no idea we existed. I don't know why I never wrote to him. I guess I wasn't sure what I'd say, or I just assumed he'd be around forever and I'd do it later or something. I thought about it a lot. I thought about him a lot. This sounds really weird, but growing up as an angsty teen, just knowing he was in the world made the world a lot more bearable. Knowing he was probably out buying groceries or walking the dog or whatever he got up to, just doing normal life stuff like I was. He made the world more bearable, and I wish I told him that. I wish he had known. And I have a letter in my head that I'll never send now, so I suppose I'm sharing it with you. Cities are just big villages with people in them. They don't have magical powers, they are not alive. Not really, not even Nashville. But the people in them are alive. I am now very aware that instead of travelling several thousand miles to visit a place an artist I worshipped liked, I should have just written a few lines to the guy himself and said thanks for the music. Because cities last for ages. People don't. I'm sure you've got your own musical loves, and I don't want to condescend. Any decent artist is often suffering from some flavour of cripplingly low self-esteem. I don't know why, it just seems like the price of admission. So, if your favourite humans are still alive, and you haven't already, may I gently recommend you drop them a line or two, just in case they don't know how much they mean to you. I might start doing that anyway. David Berman's last project, as far as I'm aware, came out very recently, this time under the name Purple Mountains. I strongly recommend the song Margaritas at the Mall. I love it, and the album was brilliant too. I've left my favourite of favourite stuff of his below, and I just hope you like it too. The problem, of course, is that you can send someone a link to a song, but you can't send them a link to the memory that song evokes. And for me, all this stuff is bound up with becoming a person, essentially, and being helped through that strange adolescent period we all go through by someone much wiser and more talented than I could ever have hoped to be. Those are the evenings you wish you could tell the artist about, when everything was lost and you felt ugly as ugly could be, and someone's music or art got you out of it somehow. And they'll never even know. Again, you've got your own musical loves, I'm sure, but he was mine, and I hope maybe some folk find the same thing I enjoyed so much in his stuff. I'll read you a little something I like, the ending of one of his poems that I plagiarised just recently. In fact, I'll bet you something. Somewhere in the future, I am remembering today. I'll bet you I'm remembering how I walked into the park at 5:30, my favourite time of day, and how I found 2 cold pitchers of just poured beer sitting there on the bench. I am remembering how my friend Chip showed up with a catcher's mask hanging from his belt, and how I said, "Great to see you, sit down, have a beer, how are you?" And how he turned to me with the sunset reflecting off his contacts and said, "Wonderful. How are you?" I hope you're remembered for a very long time yet, David, and I hope more confused and non-confused humans stumble on your music like I did and find the trapdoor out of the blues that you left open. I wish you could have known just how missed you will be, because you left an indelible mark in my brain, and it'll be there for life. And you didn't even know who I was, but I'll do my damnedest to make sure people knew who you were. You will be ever so missed, and I really, really hope you knew just how many of us loved you and your music, and ultimately, really, underneath everything, just wanted you to be okay.